Hello, Ted. Welcome to the show. I'm thrilled to have you on today.
Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
Of course. So jumping right in, can you tell us what is WorkRamp and who do you serve?
So WorkRamp is what we call the all-in-one LMS. We also call this the Learning Cloud. We basically serve three core audiences. The first one is L&D professionals within companies. We also serve sales enablement professionals. And then with our what we call the Customer Learning Cloud, we serve customer education professionals as well.
Fantastic. And we like to define all terms or acronyms here. So just going to go through this real quick. LMS, Learning Management System, L&D, Learning and Development.
And yes, I'll go through all those. And then sales enablement, that's really the people empowering your sales teams. And then customer education, people essentially helping your customers get trained on their products. And you knew the LMS category. Think of that as corporate education and basically delivering learning to employees, customers, and partners.
Fantastic. So we're going to dive into all of those areas as it relates to internal employee development and education, as well as customer education. But I do want to get a little bit more background on the company, kind of how you got to where you're at. So just for a sense of scale, can you tell me, you've raised about 70 million total over 3 rounds. I don't know if you want to share just number of customers, ARR, number of employees, just for a sense of scale.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll give you kind of a quick background on WorkRamp. We've been around for about 8 years. I would say we didn't get to product market fit till about 3 or 4 years in. So I like to say we're more like 4 to 5 years in reality. In terms of scale, so we're a little over 100 employees. We're in the tens of millions of ARR as well too. Customers, we're pushing close to, I think, about 600 plus now. And so that gives you a little bit of scale. And we serve what we like to call the mid-market. And so think of that as roughly 5,000 employees and below is really our sweet spot. We do have customers larger than that as well, or business units that are around that size. But that gives you a rough sense of scale. If a parallel to other companies would be probably a little bit bigger than like the HubSpot clientele, but smaller than like a large enterprise focused company like a ServiceNow. So we're kind of right in that middle part of the segment.
Got it. So you mentioned struggling with product market fit early on, and that's what our show is all about figuring out those early stages, because that's really where most startups fail, is landing that product market fit. So was that struggle an issue or a gap in the product, or was it a gap between figuring out the right audience to sell that product? I guess another way to ask that is, is the product the same as what you launched with, or have you pivoted it along the way to get to where you're at?
Yeah, those first 3 to 4 years, I call them the wandering the desert years, where you think you have product market fit, you don't think you have it, you have a lot of highs and lows too. For us, ours was a little more unique, where I would call it go-to-market fit was what we're struggling. So actually, what you said second was really our issue, which was we didn't really know who to sell this to. Our product was coming into an existing category, which was the LMS category that I mentioned at the top of the discussion, which had been around since literally the late 90s. And we were coming in to redefine the category. So we didn't really have a problem with the technology per se. What we had a problem with was being able to sell this to the right audience. And when we focused on nailing down that ICP or the ideal customer profile, that was when we got to what we called go-to-market fit. And that's when everything started to click. And again, we were founded in 2015, and that all started to click in the 2018 era-ish. And that's, if you look at our funding trajectory, that's when we start to get our actual larger rounds past our initial seed round, which we had gotten in 2016.
Very interesting. So what, if you can dive in a little further, what did you need to change about your go-to-market strategy? Was it targeting a different audience? Was it changing the messaging or how you portrayed the product to the audience? How did you overcome that gap that you were talking about?
You know what? It was actually removing our stubbornness and making a choice. The answer was actually right there in front of us the whole time. And what I mean by that is, even from the initial days, that ICP was in our customer customer base. We just never chose to focus on it. So I'll give you an example. In a given day, in let's call it 2016, 2017, I'd be selling to a trucking company in Chicago, a nursing home in the Northeast, a biking tourist company in South America, and then selling to Square here in San Francisco. And I was going on site and to their sales enablement team. And that was our target market was sales teams located in the Bay Area, mostly tech companies, in companies that had teams that were kind of sub 250 in terms of employee size. That was our sweet spot. And when I call it stubbornness, is I just wanted to come out of the gates and do it all. I wanted to sell to every customer, anybody who raised their hand. I wanted to be able to sell them our product, but the data was showing us this is your ICP, this will grow. And once we shed all those other pretend ICPs, we settled on this one, and then we grew the business organically from there. And that was what launched us into our Series A and beyond.
Such a good point, and such a difficult conundrum that founders almost inevitably find themselves in, which is that you need to narrow your focus in order to grow. And it's so counterintuitive and easy to say, hard to do, because you're turning away opportunities. But you have to believe that by focusing, by selecting who you're going to be, and by definition, meaning who you're not, then you're going to allow yourself to really grow into, that opportunity that's in front of you.
Yeah. When I talk to founders that are coming out of the gate and are saying, we are XYZ platform for all of your needs. And I just have PTSD where I was just like that because I was trained. I came from Box and from Cisco, where they're very well-established companies. And you can legitimately say you're a platform, like at Box, you're a content platform. That makes sense. But you're also thousands of employees and hundreds of millions of ARR. But when you're a startup coming out of the gate saying you're a platform, every customer will be like, I've never heard of you. You're 5 people. How could you be a platform that I can trust? And that was the problem we had coming out of the gate, is we thought we could just be this new age learning platform for all your learning needs. And we needed to start small and then grow into a platform. And now we're more of a platform, but even barely a platform because our scale is not that large compared to very large public companies that are true platforms.
Yeah. April Underwood, who I had on the show recently, I think you know her from Slack, she said a great line that startups earn the right to become a platform. You can't come out of the gate saying that you're a platform. And I'll be very honest and transparent that I'm struggling with that, narrow the focus for myself and my business, something that, I work as a fractional CMO with startups, and, I'll give them that advice, but I don't take my own medicine and narrow the focus of my practice. So it's easy to preach, harder to do. We've narrowed our focus on the stage of company that we work with, but we still work with B2B and B2C, and maybe that's a detriment to our growth. But we're getting off track, self-diagnosing here. So, what's your vision for WorkRamp? Looking 5 to 10 years out, where would you like to be?
Yeah, this is a great question. When you look that far out, and I actually have a really important lesson on this too, I'll share, is we used to not have a long-term vision. Back in the early days, we were like, all right, let's just kind of go week by week, year by year, and hopefully it comes together. And what I realized is that your employees need a vision to basically understand what's the North Star of the business, and it helps you make the right decisions, even in the short term, if you have that right long-term vision. And we made a few bad bets because we didn't have this long-term vision. And because of those bets, around that 2018 timeframe, I instilled this framework that I actually borrowed from my first company out called Cisco Systems. I was there for about 4 years. And John Chambers, the CEO, very famous Silicon Valley CEO, always had this framework internally called vision, strategy, execution. And this framework was actually really simple. Vision, 7 to 10 years out, where do you see the company going? And then strategy is, what is your differentiated strategy 3 to 5 years out to achieve that vision? And then execution is, what are you doing the next 1 to 2 years to make progress on your strategy? So very simple framework. But when you were selling switches and routers, which I was at Cisco, it gives you a good sense of purpose. And their vision was, we want to change the way the world works, lives, and plays. I don't know if that's still the vision, but that's what it was at that time. And it gave you a lot of sense of meaning and why you're doing what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Now, to bring that back to WorkRamp, our vision 7 to 10 years out is to empower every employee, customer, partner through learning. And really, that's our long-term vision. And that could be on any medium. That could be in the metaverse. That could be on mobile. That could be leveraging AI. And so it's a very big vision. And we want everyone, that's ranging from your Uber driver to your knowledge worker, being enabled through WorkRamp. And so that's the long-term vision that we see as being basically the go-to place for corporate learning, no matter what you're doing. Then our strategy is to really become a learning platform for every enterprise in the world. And then our execution then comes down to what we call the learning cloud right now, which is building this employee LMS and customer LMS. That's what we're doing right now. But that is the North Star for us, is empower every employee and customer through learning. And that's what we're trying to do as a company. And then you can see how this parlays down into what we're doing over the next 1 to 2 years, which is really redefining the LMS category.
Love it. That's a really ambitious vision, and can see how the steps that you're taking today are leading you to that direction. But rewinding to the beginning, you mentioned you came from Cisco early on, and you had a stop in at Box, and you had founded a startup previously as well. You didn't come from the learning or training space. So how did you come about to found this startup? Was it a pain that you had yourself? What was your process to come up with this idea and start WorkRamp?
Yeah, so my co-founder and I were essentially looking opportunistically in 2015 for large categories. And we basically said, hey, what's a category that no one's really paying attention to? So basically venture capitalists aren't paying attention to. That's almost large and ubiquitous, where we were the people that could actually go solve the problem and make a difference in the category, because we just came from another SaaS company at Box. And we looked around to many different categories, and we literally just found the learning category. It wasn't something that we kind of knew it tangentially through our jobs. We both have been taking compliance training. We both had, or I had been in sales. So I did a lot of sales enablement. So I knew of the category, but I wasn't a specialist in it. It wasn't like my parents were teachers, as an example. It was very opportunistic. A lot like, I remember when Jeff Blosser was telling his story about Twilio, very similar to his experience, where he just found a big category and then built a startup in it. And so it wasn't a startup formed out of, let's call it, passion or scratching our own itch. It was a startup founded around opportunity. And then what we wanted to do was then say, hey, can we make a big dent in this category? And then can we build a great company in this category, where we cared a lot about the culture, the people we were working with. And we knew, hey, this is what, and we're getting close to a decade now. We wanted to make a place where we enjoyed working at day in, day out, that we would call it, Jeff Bezos calls it skipping into work every day. We want to make sure we could skip into work every day. And so that was really how it came about. And again, we didn't know exactly how this was going to go. It could have died within the first 6 months, but I'm glad we've been able to survive and continue to grow.
That's a interesting kind of intentional approach to deciding what to build. I mean, obviously, it's worked well for you, so it's a little different than a lot of founders that come to it by, like you said, trying to scratch their own itch, building something that they were looking for. So was it simply looking at the markets that have the largest potential but least kind of disruption and opportunity there?
That's exactly what it was. And it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? If you look at the category historically, it wasn't getting many VC dollars. And so the flip side of it is, when we went to fundraise, it was hard to get VC dollars for it. But I think it was also good because you didn't have a lot of noise and you had a lot more room for disruption. And so that was really what it ended up being, was, hey, we think, like, we looked at the landscape. There was a lot of competitors at the time. Now there's about 600 LMSs. So that's a lot. But there's, I think, 30,000 SaaS companies in the world, 15,000 in the US. So it's not like crazy amount. But they were all what we called very small mom and pop LMSs, kind of doing it probably as a side hustle. When you actually dug into the competition, there were maybe 10 serious LMS competitors. And when we looked at that landscape, we're like, hey, with our backgrounds, with us going through potentially at the time we were applying a Y-Combinator, we're like, hey, we think we can outraise people, out execute, build great software. We basically put the bet on ourselves that we could go disrupt this category given what we knew of the market.
Fascinating. And you were entering a space that was pretty well defined and had some deep incumbents. Any advice for companies that are doing similar task of trying to break into a market that already exists? You have the benefit of not having to do a ton of market creation or category creation. The need is obvious. People know what it is, but you are an entrant into a place that has dominant incumbent. So what can you do as a startup in that scenario?
I'll actually say there's one piece of advice I did not like heading into an incumbent category. I remember talking to a few other founders, and I just think this is incorrect. I think the rule of thumb is, hey, if you're coming into an incumbent category, you need to be 10x better than the next or the incumbent. And what I thought that did was it forced you to build some unnatural things, because you're like, oh man, 10x better? Like 10x better is a lot. How about like 50% better? like it's 0.5x better, right? Like just be a little bit better. I don't think I have an exact percentage on how much better that is, but I don't think you need to be 10x better coming into a category that has a lot of incumbents. What I think you need to do is just do something that is different in the sense of your pitch and how you approach the market. And so, for example, in the early days, the incumbents were built in the early 2000s, even late 90s. These are competitors like Cornerstone, as an example, which became a public company and sold for a little over $5 billion a couple of years ago. And all we really did in the early days is we said, hey, we're easier to use. We're fully integrated. So like we can actually go into different parts of the tech stack and integrate because we were more modern, more usable, right? And we came in with a different go-to-market approach. We actually came in and sold to departments, like sales departments. That was our initial product market fit, instead of the HR teams, which is traditionally where this was sold to. And so those three things on the surface, you probably would not say that is 10x better. That might be a little bit better, but it was, hey, we were a new entrant. We were going at it in a different way. And that allowed us to chip away. Now it takes a little bit longer in B2B SaaS, but if you're consistent and you chip away and build your mini brand, that's how you can redefine a category. And again, when you hear VCs or other founders say, hey, if you're going to incumbent category, you need to be 10x better, that'll just cause you to build like weird stuff that you're kind of throwing against the wall. And that was the advice I didn't like in those early days.
Yeah. A lot of crappy advice out there. So be careful who you listen to. You mentioned earlier that you found your first product market fit when you tapped into the SaaS startups that were growing rapidly. They had sales teams that needed this, and you were targeting them. Was your pitch? Were you asking customers to switch from an incumbent to you, or were you kind of that first platform, and then you were able to grow with them? For example, like Stripe and Twilio, a lot of their success, of course, they did a lot of things very well, but a lot of their success was that they grew with these massive companies that were their customers, right? Whether it's Uber or I forget who the big one who Twilio tapped into, but their customers were growing rapidly and they were built into their product at the architecture level. So they grew on that piggyback. So was that part of your success, or were you actually just taking customers away from some of the incumbents as well?
Yeah, ours was slightly different. Not like, I think it's Checker who just like grew like crazy because of Uber and Lyft. We were, I would say, in the middle of what you described. So our first, let's call it 10-ish customers, were more greenfield customers. These were customers that didn't have anything in place, were about to buy something, and we were an easier to use, more economical solution for them. And so we were kind of right place, right time. But once we got established and we had that base of clients, kind of the next big group of customers were the ones that were coming up for renewal and were unhappy with their current providers. That's what's great when you're going into an existing category, is it's then really around time, renewal timing. So it's a lot like, I remember when I wanted to get my first iPhone, I just had to wait for my BlackBerry contract to come up, and I just knew on day one, once that contract was done, I'm switching over to the AT&T iPhone. Similar type of thing. You just need to make sure you catch clients at the right time on their renewals, or maybe have a conversation with them a little bit before the renewal and say, hey, here's this alternative option. I know you're not happy with your existing provider. Why don't you check us out? Now, in our category, we didn't have any big enough single clients where it's just like, hey, they grew with us, and that propelled revenue. Yes, we got seat ads from that, but it wasn't something disproportionate like in the story of Uber or Checker to Uber, where literally you could fundraise around based off one or two clients. Ours was a little more incremental, and it was really around those two pieces: new greenfield clients in the startup community, and then once we were mature enough, starting to catch people at the renewal.
Interesting. I want to double click on that piece of asking customers to switch from their incumbents. There is always switching cost depending on how sticky a product is and how entrenched it is in either integrations or in workflows, right? The behavior changes is sometimes even harder. What did you have to do to allay some of that concern? Or was that a major obstacle when trying to sell to customers that had an LMS? Maybe they reinvested in developing courses on that LMS. Did you have to do translations, integrations? Like, how did you help overcome that?
Yeah. Renewals, I think, is a great untapped resource of growth. We even start to instrument renewal signals into our platform, into our CRM. We would basically say, hey, if we had heard through the grapevine, or if we did a SDR outreach, or we call it BDR, an outreach, and they say, hey, no, we're renewing with this vendor at this timeline, we would key that into our CRM and do campaigns around renewals. And there's some systems you can go out and buy and see, hey, what are people using? So the renewal tracking is key. It's basically saying, hey, this is a target customer using this vendor, which we know its weaknesses on. Let's go out and reach out to them. Now, to your specific question of, all right, what do you do when you have those renewal conversations? There's really, really two things you want to do. The first thing you want to do is understand the pain points they have with the existing provider and literally sell to those pain points. So if they're like, hey, this thing is super hard to report with, or I can't even get it integrated to Salesforce, you know exactly what your sales pitch should be to those pain points to really talk about, hey, what's the grass is truly greener on the other side with us. What's that look like? And position heavily to that. And so that's kind of the first thing you want to do. And then to the second point is the obvious stuff. I remember Jason Lemkin posting about this, is make the switching costs seem easy. And so the number one thing that will block you from capturing a competitive renewal is that they don't want to do the change management. And so you need to make it easy. Those are things like free implementation, free data transfer. We literally would hire contractors or contract agency to help move over thousands of pieces of content through like an Upwork contractor for our clients, just to get onto our system. So be willing to take those switching costs on just to get that new logo. It will pay off over time. And so you just need to portray that, hey, this is turnkey. We will solve your pain points and we will make the change management as easy as possible, even give you things like templates to help you reintroduce the new platform to your employees. You want to make it that easy.
Yeah, that's what I've seen work, that you take on the lifting for the customer, that heavy lift of onboarding, even if that means actually going in there and transferring files or whatever it takes early on to reduce that friction. Since we're on the topic of onboarding, let's dive into customer education as a critical piece of onboarding, but also not just for that initial acquisition and activation, but it creates long-term invested customers that can even become evangelists. So how do customers leverage customer education well, or how do companies especially SaaS companies, do well by leveraging customer education with your product or in general?
Yeah. So customer education, I would say, is one of the biggest underrated resources you can have on the customer success side. And we got into the market around 2020 as an extension of our platform. So we started with what we call the employee learning cloud. That was all training your employees. And then we got into this market in 2020 around basically educating your customers and partners. We call that the customer learning cloud. And what's really interesting about the market is it is like an accelerant for your customer success team. And so what it does is it, especially in this day and age, if you think about where CS sits in the income statement, it sits in COGS, cost of goods sold, which hurts your margin. And I mean, you want to invest in your customers, but you can only do it so much because in software, you want to have roughly 80% gross margins, but every extra CS head you bring on will decrease those margins. So you have this conundrum of, hey, how do I provide great service? But how do I also have a great looking income statement? Because that's going to, in gross margin, because that's going to drive the investment we get. That's going to drive the growth in the public markets if you go public. And so you have this conundrum of providing great service, but at a reduced cost. So it's like, all right, what do I do? And the answer to that, a big answer to that, is customer education. We all have our knowledge bases, which is fine. We will all have that. But what customer education does is it handholds your clients through more advanced topics and through things like onboarding for the first time, or if you get a new stakeholder, onboarding them so they understand your platform and you don't churn them out later on. And so this basically moves this to an async process. It allows you to basically certify people as well too. You can build great champions out of people. The company that probably did this the best is Salesforce with Trailhead. Trailhead basically built a whole community of trailblazers through customer education. And if you think about customer education, then you could take that concept and put it in a box. And that's essentially what the WorkRamp platform, the customer learning cloud, does, is it gives you basically Trailhead in a box. And so if you could execute this correctly, you'll have a win-win. You can keep your margins high, but also create great customer service for your clients that will add to your bottom line by saving clients and helping them upgrade over time as well.
Yeah, Salesforce is definitely a great example. HubSpot, I think, also did similar with their certifications and customer training. Any other examples of companies that you think are doing a really good job of customer education and leveraging it as a activation and retention tool?
Yeah, for sure. Geez, there's so many good ones. I'll talk about one of our customers, Quantum Metric. They actually do it on two fronts. One of them is the obvious one, which is on the CS front. Everything we just talked about is, hey, how do I use customer education to improve customer success? The other interesting thing they did, and interesting insights, they were all about category creation. Their category was called continuous development, their analytics platform. And what they did was they want to educate the market, even just their prospects, not just their customers. They want to educate prospects and customers alike on the category itself. So they use customer education up funnel as well. So as a marketing resource, first and foremost. And then as they came down the funnel and became customers, then they put them into another academy that was more focused on their product education itself. And so we have a lot of clients that do that will have a kind of a unique funnel where they will start at the top of the funnel and educate all the way down to the bottom of the funnel and educate customers as they're going through the product. One other one I'll mention too, shout out to Split, Split.io. It's the feature flag, feature testing platform. And what they did was they made it fun. They actually, instead of calling this an academy or a university, they called it the Split Arcade. And they showed stats where they said, hey, people who have gone through customer education have been certified. They increased their engagement significantly. I can't remember the exact stat, but I think it was like 40 or 50% higher engagement after they went through a certification itself too. So another big shout out to them for success there.
Great examples. Thanks for sharing those. It's so true that it's underrated because not only are you increasing the likelihood of monetization if you're talking about that initial onboarding training of a user, you're increasing retention because they're invested. They already spent time learning your system, your platform, your materials. They're invested in that. And you even create evangelists, like I mentioned, that people showing off their HubSpot badge on their profile or their Trailhead achievements on LinkedIn. Like, people are doing marketing for you. So, like, what can be better than that? Speaking of marketing and growth, for WorkRamp, you talked about your outbound efforts as relates to sales. What other channels were most effective for your growth to date? Any particular lessons learned, and also maybe some experiments that weren't successful and taught you a lot about either the market or about your business?
I would say marketing has been a journey for us over the last 8 years. I'll break it up into a few parts. And we were probably a little bit different than most companies. I think most founders I talk to go inbound and then figure out outbound later on as a supplement. We actually did the reverse. We figured out outbound first and then had to figure out inbound. And outbound, we even struggled a bit and then figured it out. I'll start with the first 4 to 5 years of the company was pretty much all outbound driven. It was us going into our network, our sales reps going outbound. And when we formalized it into a BDR team, we try to outsource it, which did not work out well because we didn't own it as a core competence. And then once we owned it as a core competence, hired in a great manager for it and who built up the whole system, got our employees fully on board on doing this in-house, then it really started to take off. And so, but what happened was after about 6 years of going outbound, we noticed, hey, we will cap out at outbound. Like the ROI on outbound is not the best ROI. Actually, inbound has a much higher ROI for us. You need outbound there as a nice supplement, but we needed to change the culture to move inbound. And what we did is once we were able to afford essentially a VP of marketing, she's now become our CMO, Jack Foster. This was right after our Series B. We went and talked to the board and we said, hey, this is our time. After the Series B, we've kind of figured out our product market fit. We figured out outbound. We know how to sell. We figured out our sales cycle. The next big part of our growth journey is we need to go crack inbound. And so we essentially start to halt the investments on the outbound strategy, shifted those dollars and said, hey, we want to actually now bring in 60 to 70% of our demand inbound. And that was a transformation in the business, was to say, hey, we were about 70% outbound, 30% inbound about that time. We need to flip that. We need to go inverse all within a year. And so we had to build the muscle, build the team. And that was over this 2021, 2022 period. Once we had the funding to go do this, and Jack's team, our marketing team, has done an amazing job. And so now we are an inbound focused company that has outbound as a supplement. So it was a really nice transition, but didn't happen till roughly the Series B.
That's a significant shift. What was driving that over that period where you basically flipped the ratio of inbound versus outbound? Are you talking about marketing driven lead gen? Are you talking about product led growth? How are you driving those inbound leads?
For us, it was marketing-led demand gen. It was essentially, we had one superstar marketer who she was just basically doing everything, keeping the lights on mostly. So it was a little more product marketing focused, a little more events focused. When we brought in Jack, we built the machine where we had a content team, we had a demand gen team, we also had a product marketing team as well too. So we just built a bona fide marketing team. So to answer your question, the first thing was actually neither. It was actually bringing in a team who was capable. And then that team that was capable built all the different pillars. And the biggest pillar of that was the paid demand gen team. We didn't do like growth hacks or get lucky or do some crazy PLG stuff. We kind of did tried and true enterprise demand gen tactics because we knew, hey, this was safe, had little risk. Then it was all about kind of optimizing the spend there. We weren't looking for the silver bullet to figure out this growth because we needed to do this all within roughly a year and do what was tried and true.
Fantastic. So you're talking about paid acquisition through Google Ads, LinkedIn, lead gen, the usual suspects.
The usual suspects. Nothing super unique.
Webinars, white papers, etc.
All the usual suspects. I think what was unique though was, hey, the brand, the messaging, that's where you could be unique on, but it wasn't like, hey, we found some magical channel that had just crazy ROI. It was doing all the blocking and tackling and getting the foundation in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's no shortcuts in life. People look for that silver bullet, but you gotta, put your mind to it, put investment behind it, and execute in each area. Uh, you alluded to this earlier, and I've heard you speaking elsewhere about the topic of finding product market fit multiple times. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that? Because that's, I think, one of the biggest learnings from my journey in this podcast, talking to founders about product market fit. It's often talked about as this magical moment, angels are singing, et cetera. You reach it. It's not. It's a journey, and you constantly have to find it over and over and over again. So I would love to hear from you kind of what that meant for WorkRamp as you've looked for and achieved product market fit multiple times.
Yeah, I think there's this perception that you only need to find product market fit maybe twice, three times in a company's history. And I think that was true for these earlier generation companies. I remember Saster posting about, or having a podcast hosted with the Amplitude founder, where I think they did their second product around 100 million or so. I could be wrong on that, but they waited a while until they got their second product. And a lot of people talk about the second act of companies, like think about Uber going to Uber Eats and that kind of saving them through the pandemic versus Lyft. And so I think historically I thought of that as like, hey, when you're at big scale, you need a second act and you need another product market fit. But what I think's happened lately in SaaS is that scale has been reduced to a much smaller time frame, and you need to do it more frequently because the disruption is happening so quickly. And so I'll give you the example for us specifically is essentially for every fundraise round we've had, we've gone through seed, A, B, and C, so 4 major fundraising rounds. Every one of those rounds had an inflection point that kind of was based off another, I would call it product or product market fit phase in our business. And I really got this advice from our board member, Jack Altman from Lattice, where he had sat me down. This is before he was a board member. He said, hey, every time we grew at Lattice significantly was with a new product introduction that was successful. And right now, I can't remember the exact count. I think they have like close to 8 products or something now. You're seeing this with Rippling with their compound startup concept. And similar thing for WorkRamp, where at the series in the seed phase, I talked about that product market fit with the sales enablement buyer. Then at our A, and that got us to our Series A because we got the hit and we got our Series A. Then heading into Series B, we got product market fit on our customer education platform, that customer learning cloud. So that is essentially our second product. And then heading into Series C, we were getting product market fit on what we call our WorkRamp content product, which is off-the-shelf content offered within our platform. And so these were like 3 major inflection points of the business. And the Series C was also based off our vision of what we call the Learning Cloud now, which is this all-in-one LMS platform. And so, again, we've been around 8 years, but that's roughly 3-ish kind of product market fit moments. And we're not even at public scale yet, like I talked about in the earlier part of this question. We're not like Uber size, we're not Amplitude size. We're still in the tens of millions of ARR and have already hit kind of this product market fit over and over again with a multi-product strategy.
Fantastic. What's next? Any big announcements or new products coming out soon?
Yeah, so we do have, I think our biggest one that we just released was it's a continuation on this WorkRamp content product. It's called our development tab. Think of it as what you might be used to seeing in LinkedIn Learning, but built within our platform itself. So you don't have to go buy yet another license with a LinkedIn Learning as an example. That is really exciting. It allows you to develop your employees directly within our platform. And then later this year, we have a couple major announcements, which I'll hold tight on, that I'm really excited about for our different buyer personas that we'll be releasing later this year. But we did just release today our new generative AI capabilities, which helps you create content on the fly. And our platform, that's one of the biggest things you do is create content. So this will dramatically accelerate content creation.
Awesome. And I have a question for you about AI, but we're going to come back to that in a minute. We talked about customer education, and we talked a little bit about internal education. Within that category, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that you have kind of more of like internal training and compliance type stuff, and then you have upskilling, educational. Is that kind of the categorization within employee development?
Yeah, you could think about it as internally, there's really, and that's what we call the employee learning cloud. There's really two big categories. There's one that's driven by, let's call HR, your L&D professional. That is upskilling, that is compliance, security training. So all the general people related training, but upskilling is probably one of the most important of those. Like, hey, I need to do leadership development, make my managers awesome. That's upskilling. The other big pillar of learning internally is the enablement pillar, which is more around enablement of your business processes and enabling to help your customer facing teams get better. And so that's really around training on your product, how to sell it correctly, how to service your clients well. Those are the kind of two big pillars of learning internally. And we like to say learning is a growth engine, because if you can enable your people on both of those pillars, that will help them grow in their roles and be more effective. Just like Andy Grove said, like training is one of the highest leverage activities you can do. You can train 10 people or 100 people with one resource, and that can exponentially increase the effectiveness of each individual person in that training. We try to drive that type of mantra through those two pillars, kind of this upskilling and employee training, and then this enablement training as well.
Thanks for clarifying that. So focus on that latter piece of enablement, and especially since we're focused on this podcast at the early stages. So the journey of most SaaS startups is, the founder or the founders typically do that first set of, 20, 30 sales, and then they bring in somebody to do the next handful of sales, and then they start building out a go-to-market team. How do you use training and like you said, enablement training to transfer that knowledge from the founders to those first sales hires? And then as you're building out that go-to-market team, how do you leverage training and education to really scale that quickly?
Yeah. When I talk to other founders and CEOs that are in the early stage, you basically have those three phases you mentioned, which is, hey, founder-led sales, you're kind of taking notes on what's working. It's all in your head. Then you hire your first couple reps, and those reps you're training in real time, off a call. You're jumping on a whiteboard. I still remember those sessions with our early reps. Like, hey, I would literally whiteboard out what they need to know about the product and how to sell it. Then this third phase is, how do you go scale that? And where it becomes important is, I would say, once you get to around 10 reps or so, you need to get really serious around enablement at scale. And so, because it's hard to train, especially if you're remote first, it's hard to train people consistently when you're above 10 or so reps. And that's when you need to start looking at platforms like a WorkRamp or anything else out there to make sure, hey, my reps can consistently sell the product. They know how to objection handle. They're consistently up to date. I'll give a great example. Is we do these bi-weekly lunch and learns. We actually call it lead and learn, led by our sales enablement leader, Aaron Paul, who actually comes in and creates these great 30-minute trainings, leveraging our platform and doing this live, that keeps everyone up to date every other week on our latest product releases and the value props of those releases, so we can bring those to our field accurately.
Yeah. I've also heard you say that today in this economy where SaaS sales have gotten a lot more difficult, that everybody needs to be a seller, right? So it's not just the salespeople. Anybody that's facing the customer, whether it's marketing or customer success, they can all be doing a better job with these tools to sell the product, to upsell, to cross-sell, et cetera.
Yeah, that's spot on. And that's why we invite everyone from go-to-market to these trainings, not just the sales reps. We'll invite marketing. We'll invite our BDR team as well, too, even though they're not selling the product per se. They're more doing lead capture. And the reason being is every touch point, even the implementation managers, is every touch point is an opportunity to sell or cross sell to a client. So, for example, implementation manager, they're spending a ton of time with the client, and maybe the sales rep missed a use case. They need to be able to spot that and be able to spit out the value prop on the spot. And so that's why I like to say, hey, everyone in your company that's customer facing is a seller. They need to be trained up because they need to be able to do this as a team sale. And that's really when you push your NDR dollars, your net dollar retention dollars, because there's not just one touch point. There's not just your AE. There's your AE, your IM, your implementation manager. We call it client outcomes manager, which is a CSM in a lot of companies. There's your marketing team, asking them for case studies, getting on the phone with them. There's your support team interacting via chat or ticket. All these people are all touch points for potential sales opportunities in the future.
Absolutely. So you touched on generative AI. We can't get away from it. So I'm going to ask you, as someone who's deeply embedded in the learning and education space, but also as a father, I believe you have 3 kids, right?
Yep.
How is AI going to change how we learn, both in a corporate setting and for children's education?
Oh, geez, this is a great one. I think for corporate, I'll answer the easier one, or the ones I'm more knowledgeable on right now. Corporate education, I think it's going to be pretty obvious. The AI craze will essentially shorten your learning feedback loops and essentially be an assistant. Like you can imagine, and everyone's going to do it, it's not just us, that, hey, it's going to be able to feed you the knowledge you're seeking or that you have yet to seek more quickly, to basically make you better at your job. So if you're in sales and you're selling against a competitor, the AI companions in the future will be like, I noticed you're selling to a competitor. Say these 4 things in the next 30 seconds, right? Like that is probably going to happen. It's going to happen with all the platforms, including us. So that's almost like a no-brainer. You will see that happen. It's just a matter of timing there. On the employee side, I had one of our board members who's at Microsoft. She's heading up a lot of this AI journey for her part of the business, and she had given me a really great insight: is that learning at a school level or for our children is going to be hyper personalized based on how you learn in the future. And that was kind of the aha moment that I want to take back into the corporate environment. And we're going to do that through our products, is everyone learns in a different way. The AI companions will understand how you specifically learn. Like, hey, Ted learns more through audio than through written text. Feed him his learnings in an audio driven way, right? Like those are examples, and he likes it in small sound bites at 8 p.m. at night, right? Like when he's working out. Like that's how you're going to get personalization at the education level, and I think that's going to dramatically improve the output of our kids and the ways they learn. Like even my kids now, they're 8, 4, and almost 2, is that they're all learning in different ways. One likes to learn before bedtime. One likes to learn on the weekends, hates learning on the weekdays. Like the AI trend is going to make sure that our kids learn in the most effective way possible, which will produce better outcomes for them later on.
Yeah, I totally agree on the hyper personalization. I think it's going to go beyond that, where it's not just like how we learn, and of course the feedback loop of like knowing where you're up to know what to focus on and what to add lessons to, but also by making it exciting and making it interesting, by knowing your interests, right? If your kid is excited about baseball, you can learn physics and motion and use baseball as the way to teach it, right? And things like that. So I think it's super exciting, and I'm glad that you're bringing that as well to the old, boring world of corporate education.
Totally. It's probably easier to bring it there.
Yeah. Ted, I'm enjoying this a lot, but we're running out of time. So we're going to close out with our exciting lightning round. I'll ask you a few questions, answer in 30 to 60 seconds each. Sound good?
Cool. Let's do it.
All right. What's a book, podcast, and or newsletter that you find yourself recommending most often?
What I love, especially to founders, is the Founders Podcast. If you haven't checked it out, it's on the Colossus Network. David Senra, love him. He's great.
Absolutely love it. I think this is the fourth time that we've plugged him.
Oh, everyone loves him. All right, not just me.
No, I keep plugging him. But yeah, other guests as well. But I'm going to try to have him on here. I love what he's doing there, but can't argue with you on that. What SaaS tools? Give me 3 SaaS tools that you can't live without.
Ooh, let me look at my toolbar here. I literally have these here. So obviously, can't live without Salesforce. That's a big one. I'm going to give kind of boring ones, but I'll give maybe 2 or 3 boring ones. Salesforce, Confluence, because we really double down on knowledge sharing, especially because we're 100% remote. Shout out to Lattice. Lattice is a huge one for us, especially running effective one-on-ones. And then for us, one game changer has been Gong. Gong is a great way to learn more about your customers, get better visibility into your forecast and the customer health discussions you're having. So Gong is probably Gong and Lattice are probably the newer, more unique ones that help us run our business.
Great examples. And you know when somebody's doing something really well when people will ask whether you use that in an interview and they'll decide whether to work there. Like, if you don't have Gong, I'm not coming to work for you. I'm like, oh God, you really like Gong. That's a good sign.
Yes. We used to do Google searches on job requests to see how many were listing WorkRamp, but that's a great way to see, hey, is your mini brand actually building in the market?
Absolutely. You recently started podcasting. What's the most surprising thing that you've learned in that journey so far?
Oh, that's a good one. Actually, the insight was actually from you is, hey, when we were talking in our pre-interview, is that big names are not the key to success. It's actually the quality of content that is the key to success. And we're seeing that in our numbers too. It's hey, you think you just want to land big fish for podcasts, but it's actually around the level of and quality of content. And I think that's really great for the industry. That means, hey, we need to put great content out there, not just try to, I would call it like logo grab in terms of getting big names, is look for people who will have the best conversations with you and produce great content.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. What skill or habit that served you well in the early days of leading WorkRamp have you had to unlearn now that you've scaled past 100 employees?
Ooh. I think for me personally is figuring out how to in the early days, I was very hands-on. I like being hands-on, and then learning how to delegate now. I basically have to unlearn that. And so, and it's really hard when you're around 100 employees, you're kind of grappling on both sides where you're not big enough to delegate everything. Plus, but you do need to delegate some things, and you can still get hands-on. So that's a little bit that we're right on the cusp there, but I do need to unlearn getting too hands-on.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Ted, really enjoyed talking with you, learning about your company, learning about your journey, and all of the amazing insights that you shared about go-to-market, sales, and learning and education. How can people reach you if they want to continue the conversation, learn more about you, or learn more about WorkRamp? Can you give a plug for your podcast as well? And any final words you want to leave us with?
Yeah, for sure. So Learn With podcast, so it's a newer podcast. Thanks for all the tips that you've given us. So go subscribe and listen to that. Great guests on there too. And then you can learn more about us, workramp.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I accept all invitations and messages, so I'll get back to you there. And then, yeah, I think we've covered a lot of great ground. I think maybe my biggest piece of advice that I leave everyone with is kind of just put one foot in front of the other. We have to be patient in this market. Don't give up too soon. The market will return, especially on the tech side. And again, it's just putting one foot in front of the other. Keep making progress week after week, and soon enough, you'll be a big company.
Love that. Thank you, Ted. All of those links are in the show notes. Check out Learn With podcast. I'm going to subscribe and listen to that as well. Thank you, and hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me on.